Hi, I'm Michael, and behind the camera is Ellie. We are the Bill Paying Hobbyists, and we're using our hobbies and skill sets to pay down debt and to save up for a down payment on a house. In this video, we're turning a pen for profit, and we're showing you our easy creative take on this popular hybrid style. Stick around to see the end result. Let's get to it. All right, today we're making a Nexus pen kit. This one is similar to a slimline if you know anything about pens, and as we go along, you'll figure them out in the different ones. We're using a Macassar Ebony wood blank to go on the bottom towards the tip, the part you're gonna hold. And then at the top, towards the end cap, we decided to go a little bit on fire, and we're gonna use this acrylic blank that happens to be white, orange, and red. So we've got acrylic and wood together today. Let's go over the parts on the pen. So this is our Nexus pen kit. This kit does not have a spring. This is your ink cartridge. It has a transmission that turns and it makes the ink go in and out. This is our pen tip. This kit is a black chrome. This is our end cap with the clip. And then this is our beauty ring that goes in the center. And these are our two tubes. So you'll have your center ring that goes here, end cap with the clip here, tip goes here. This will be on this end. And that's the basic idea of what your pen is going to look like when we finish. All right, so our first step is we need to use our tubes to mark and cut our blanks. And then after that, we will drill the holes and epoxy. So let's go over to the bandsaw. We're at the bandsaw. Our first step is to cut down the blanks. The blank is the pieces of wood or the pieces of acrylic, Alumilite, whatever you're going to use to make the body of your pen out of. Both tubes are the same length and the same diameter, so I can just use one as a gauge. This is a special sled that was made by my father, and if you want to see how we use it, there's a video for it. Basically, I'm going to take my tube, I'm going to put it here, I'm going to put my gauge there and my wood blank here, and that's going to cut it for the length I need. And here we go. When you're cutting your blanks, you always want to make sure you have a little bit longer than the actual tube. So as you can see, my blanks are about 1/8 of an inch longer than the tube. That gives me room in case my blank happens to blow out when I'm drilling it, and it helps me make sure that it's completely square to the tube when it comes time to do that, and you'll see that later on. Next, we're going to drill the holes, so we need to go back over to the bench and find the center of our blanks. From here, we just want to find the center of these two blanks, and the easiest thing to do is draw a line from corner to corner, corner to corner. X marks the spot. That is the center of that blank. Now what I like to do is I like to make a little indent right there at the center, and it helps the point of the drill bit find the center of the blank. So I take my awl, my 1950s hammer. I say this all the time about my 1950s hammer. I actually don't know how old it is, but my grandfather gave it to me, so I use it. Just put this on the center. I'm not gonna beat it, I'm just gonna make a little tap and a little dent. Doesn't take a lot. You don't want to hit it too hard, you know, crack it or split your wood, and that's it. Now from here we're going to go to the drill press and we're going to drill our holes. Alright, as I said before, for this particular pen kit, both tubes are the same, and this one is a 7mm, so I'm going to use my 7mm drill bit and drill a hole in each of those. I'm going to use homemade clamp from my dad and my bottom board so they don't have any blowout. Put the blank all the way in, all the way down, flat, flat, flat. Give it a little snug, and this is my clamp. It will go nowhere. The bottom board helps to prevent blowouts because the drill is actually going to go through the blank and into this board, so it's pressed up against this board. It keeps it stable, and there's really nowhere for it to go. It will not blow out. Always check to make sure your drill bit's going to go at least to there, and it will. See if it goes past it a little bit. I need to raise my table up just a little bit. Safety glasses. Take your time when you're drilling. You don't have to do it fast, especially on acrylic, because if you go really fast on acrylic, it'll start to get hot and it will get soft, and then your blank is no good. And there are my two holes. Now I'm ready to glue. Now that our holes are drilled, our next step is we need to sand our tubes. You don't want to put your epoxy on smooth tubes like this because the epoxy is not going to hit here. It needs something rough to stick to. It'll just slide right off of this and you'll have a blowout in your blanks. Use some 120 grit 3M sandpaper, just regular wood sandpaper, and just rough them up. Another tip, I use 2-part epoxy. I like to use the JB Weld 5-minute epoxy. I let it sit overnight. A lot of people like to use CA glue when they do their pens. The CA is just a super glue because it dries really fast. Something like this, Mercury Adhesives Medium. They'll use this on their tubes to glue them there. I don't like to do it because it will cause a blowout a lot more often than the epoxy will. Save the CA for your finishes. Don't use the CA for your glue. My recommendation, you do what's best for you. Just finished raining here in Florida, so we're gonna take this inside and glue these up inside, and then we'll let them sit overnight. With acrylics, a lot of times they become transparent the closer you get to the center. So it's up to you. Do you want to see this through your acrylic, or you can paint your tube? This is Magic Fly acrylic paint. It's white, and yeah, this is what I'm gonna use. I took this and I wrapped some painter's tape around it, just enough so that this would fit on here snug so it doesn't turn. Now I can paint it without getting paint all over my hands. You don't want to put a thick coat on here, because if you do, your tube is not going to fit into the blank. Then just enough to get rid of the brass color. There, just a nice thin coat. It doesn't take a lot, and we'll let it dry for about an hour. We moved inside to glue our blanks. The white tube in the acrylic and the unpainted into the wood. Mix equal parts of epoxy and mix for about 30 seconds. Apply a generous coat to the tube. Work it in and out of the blank for good, even coverage. Do the same for this one. Let it sit overnight and finish up tomorrow. Now that the epoxy has dried for 24 hours, we need to make sure that any of the dried epoxy that got inside the tubes is removed. I just used an X-Acto type knife and cut out the excess. If the epoxy is left in the tube, my bushings will not sit correctly. All done, time to turn. This is my jet lathe. It's a 12 by 21. What that means is I can turn something a 12-inch diameter up to 21 inches long. Like spindles, if I'm gonna make a chair, if I wanna do a stairwell or something of that nature. This is my headstock. This is my tailstock. My headstock. This is my tailstock. The headstock has the motor in it. That's what turns, that's what drives everything. The tailstock does not have a motor in it. In my headstock, I have my pen mandrel. It's a number 2 Morris, which helps it to fit right inside the shaft of my headstock. It has its own little shaft right here, and this is where my pen blanks will go when I'm gonna turn them. On the tailstock, I have a number 2 Morse pen mandrel saver. The name tells you what it is. It saves your mandrel. Has a hole in the center that the shaft fits into. This part fits into the end of my tailstock, and that head turns. What it does is it keeps my shaft straight and level, keeps it from wobbling. If you turn without one of these and you push on it, your shaft's gonna get wobbly and it's gonna bend, and then it's gonna hit you and it's gonna destroy something. Couple things before you turn. When I put my chisel on my rest, I usually use my finger as a guide to run along the back of the tool rest. I let my chisel run on that, and I hold it down with my thumb. I don't want to push real hard, and I just use it as a guide to help keep me straight. I also keep my elbows in, stand in one spot, and I just stay tight and I rock back and forth. If I'm out here and I'm trying to cut like this, number 1, I'm too far away to see, and number 2, my arms are gonna go in and out, and that's gonna make it ugly. So just hold your arms in tight and rock back and forth. It'll keep a nice, smooth, even motion. This is my tool rest. Everyone has their preferred location. I like to have mine here. I also need to make sure the bar is parallel with the material I'm cutting. Another important part is to make sure the rest is high enough so that the blade of my chisel is at the center of my project. And I don't want to angle the blade of my chisel down or up while cutting. I want it level. This is the control center, so to speak. This is my on-off switch with a safety key. If it's out, it won't work. This is my directional switch. For this project, I want it in forward. And this is my speed control knob. My lathe will turn as low as about 188 revolutions per minute, up to around 3,650 RPM. I'm not going to cut that fast, so I'll set it around 2,800 RPM. Since this kit has 2 blanks that follow the same line, I'm going to rough cut them close to my bushings together. I will get my ebony close first, then the acrylic. They are both round and somewhat close to size. Now I need to square off the ends so that the blanks are the correct length and flat so they fit this Nexus kit properly. To do this, I'm using my number 2 Morse drill chuck with an off-center squaring jig. This goes in my tailstock. I have this Velcro backed sandpaper with a piece of hook Velcro glued to the 3/4 inch plywood that is attached to my faceplate, and I screw that on to my headstock. Now I use a punch pin that my blank fits on smoothly and secure that into my off-center jig. Turn my lathe onto around 1500 RPM, get my tailstock close, and make light passes with the blank. I want to sand the end of the acrylic down to the point where I can see the end of my brass tube shine. Take your time. If you sand off too much, then your blank will be too short and your pen will not work properly. I do both sides, then move on to the wood blank. At a certain point, you'll want to clean your sandpaper. A couple seconds with an abrasive cleaner and done. Take that all apart, get my pen mandrel and saver back in, and I'm ready to finish. From here, I'm going to only turn one blank at a time, just my preference. I will get very close to my bushings. I don't want to cut into my bushings because they won't be any good for the next pen. Now that I am millimeters away, I want to swap out my steel bushings for my non-stick plastic bushings. It's time to sand, and if I sand my steel bushings, they get smaller, and I can get a lot of steel shavings in my blank. I start sanding with 180 grit. I will sand the ends first to get them to the correct size for this kit. My caliper comes in real handy to check the ends of my blank. Now that my ends are close, I use a small piece of 1/4" plywood as a backer board and sand the rest of the blank. This helps give it a nice even surface. After 180 grit, I do the same with 320 grit. Wipe off the dust, then sand with the grain to get rid of all the spiral sanding marks. If I don't, they will show when I polish it. The next sanding step for me is with a 500 to 600 grit foam pad. Sand with the lathe on at around 1300 RPM, again, not a lot of pressure. Wipe, then with the grain. Another wipe and a final bare wood sand with a 1500 grit foam pad. Next, I blow off as much dust as possible, and then wipe it down with denatured alcohol and the lathe on. I need to remove all the dust particles. If I don't, when I put my finish coat on, I will get white specks in the finish and it will look terrible. I turn my lathe down to around 600 RPM and lay down some cardboard to protect the bed of my lathe. My finish coat is a CA glue made by Mercury Adhesives. I use a thin flex and a medium flex. 2 coats of the thin and 3 coats of medium, with a spray of accelerator in between each. See those lines? I need to make those go away. For that, I use Abernet. This goes from 180 to 400 grit. I just want to smooth the lines. I don't want to remove all of the CA. The same as sanding the raw blank with very, very light pressure. Now it's time to polish. For this blank, I'm going to wet sand with Zona paper. It ranges from 400 to 8,000 grit. Start with number 1 all the way to number 6. Watch for the water flying off the blank and move to the next number. Time to polish with some glass polish, 2 coats. Last, a coat of Renaissance wax. Buff it off and finished. Look at that gloss. The same cutting and initial sanding process for the acrylic blank. Cut down close to the bushings. And sand to size. For acrylic, the final process is a little different. No CA glue. I only need to wet sand and polish. This time, I'm using micromesh to wet sand. This set goes from 4,000 to 12,000 grit with 9 different pads. Same as Zona. Look for the water and move to the next pad. Glass polish. Renaissance wax. Done. Time to assemble. I'm using my drill press with a soft wood insert and a flat wood scrap on the table. First, I chamfer the tubes to help all the pieces press together easier. Let's look at the kit. First, the tip into the smaller beveled side of the wood blank. Nice even pressure. Now the transmission for the other end. This line is a gauge for how far to press it into the blank. The lower body is done. For the upper body, find that sweet spot and press. Slide the center band over the transmission. Screw the ink cartridge in. Test your transmission. Make sure the point of your ink sticks out far enough. If it doesn't, press the transmission in a tiny bit further. There, just right. Center band back on, upper body on, and we are done. It's numbers time. For our shop supplies and our tools, we're looking at $4. For our materials like the pen kit and the blank and our time, we're looking at $21. We plan on selling this at Marketplace for $45. When we do, that'll give us a profit of $20 to put towards our 2021 financial goals. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to stomp the subscribe button, and we'll see you next time.